Christmas Eve, 1944. Guam, a tropical island in the Pacific where American forces had just recaptured from the Japanese after a bloody battle that cost 1,783 American lives. You'd think after fighting a common enemy, after watching your brothers die side by side, that color wouldn't matter anymore. You'd be wrong. 9 black Marines are given 24-hour holiday passes. Exemplary service, the officers said. A reward. Christmas Eve in Agana, the main town. But as these men talk to local Chamorro women, white Marines open fire on them. Actual gunfire, at their own fellow Marines. On Christmas Eve, the black Marines run for their lives. 8 make it back to base. 1 is missing. That's how the Agana Race Riot started. And before it ended on December 26th, 2 black Marines would be dead, 43 would be court-martialed, and the military would try to cover up one of the most shameful incidents of racial violence in World War II history. But here's the twist. Unlike most stories like this, justice actually happened. Eventually. Let's rewind 4 months. July 1944. The Battle of Guam has just ended. American forces spent 2 brutal weeks recapturing this island from the Japanese. 1,783 Americans killed, over 6,000 wounded, 18,000 Japanese dead. The fighting was hell, but for the Black Marines of the 25th Depot Company who arrived in late August 1944, the real hell was just beginning. And the enemy wasn't Japanese anymore. Guam was being transformed into a massive air base. 5 huge airfields built by Navy Seabees. B-29 bombers would fly from here to bomb mainland Japan. The island was critical to the Pacific War effort, and the 25th Depot Company, all black Marines, were there to load supplies, handle munitions, do the dangerous work that keeps an air base running. But some of the white Marines of the 3rd Marine Division had a problem. The black Marines were talking to local Chamorro women, dating them. And in the twisted racial hierarchy of 1940s America, that was unacceptable. White Marines began actively trying to prevent black Marines from visiting Agana. They shouted racial slurs. They threw rocks. They occasionally hurled smoke grenades into the black Marines' camp area. One black Marine later said being stationed on Guam was like being in a city deep down in the South because of the hostility. He explained, "Where there are women and white and Negro men, you will find discrimination in large quantities." On Guam, that discrimination included white Marines in trucks throwing bottles, rocks, and even smoke grenades at black servicemen. One smoke grenade landed in a fuel dump where black Marines were working with dangerous amounts of aviation fuel. An explosion that could have killed them all was narrowly avoided. The black Marines complained to their superiors. Nothing happened. The harassment continued. Then the violence escalated. A white sailor shot and killed a black Marine from the 25th Depot Company in a fight over a woman. In a separate incident, a black sentry from the 27th Depot Company, after constant harassment, fatally wounded a white Marine who was tormenting him. Both men were eventually court-martialed for voluntary manslaughter. Justice? Maybe. But the pattern was clear. This island was a powder keg. Major General Henry Louis Larson, the military commander and civil governor of Guam, was warned that serious trouble was brewing among his own men. He preached reconciliation and unity. His words came too late. Christmas Eve, 1944. 9 black Marines from the 25th Depot Company received 24-hour passes for exemplary service. These men had earned this. They'd worked hard, followed orders, done everything asked of them. A day off on Christmas Eve seems like the least they deserved. They go into Agana. They're talking to some Chamorro women, just socializing, when white Marines see them and open fire. Actual gunshots at American Marines because they were talking to women. The Black Marines scatter and run. It's chaos, darkness, gunfire. 8 of them make it back to the depot safely. But one man is missing. Nobody knows if he's wounded, captured, dead, just gone. The word spreads through the 25th Depot Company like wildfire. One of their own is missing. White Marines shot at them on Christmas Eve. And nobody knows what happened to their missing brother. 40 Black Marines make a decision. They load into 2 army trucks and head back to Agana. They're going to find their missing man. They're armed, angry, and done with being pushed around. At the same time, another Black Marine, one who stayed at the base, calls the military police. He warns them the trucks are coming. The MPs scramble to erect barricades across all roads leading to Agana. When the trucks reach the roadblock, a standoff begins. 40 armed Black Marines on one side, military police on the other, tension crackling in the tropical air. This could turn into a massacre. But then an MP officer delivers news. The missing Marine has been found safe. He's already back at camp. The information calms the situation. The Black Marines, satisfied their brother is safe, turn the trucks around and head back to base. Crisis averted. Or so everyone thinks. But the night isn't over. Around midnight, a truck filled with armed White Marines drives into the segregated Black camp. They claim someone from the camp threw a piece of coral and hit one of their Marines. The depot's commanding officer has to personally order the White Marines to leave before the situation escalates again. Christmas Day, 1944. You'd think Christmas Day would bring peace. You'd be wrong. An African-American Marine is walking back to camp from Agana. 2 drunk White Marines shoot him dead. Just murder him on the road. Within hours, another Black Marine is shot and killed by another drunken White Marine in Agana. 2 murders, on Christmas Day, of American Marines, by other American Marines. The news reaches the 25th Depot Company. Their brothers are being killed. 2 in one day. The military police aren't protecting them. Their officers aren't protecting them. They're on their own on an island where their own countrymen are hunting them. After midnight on December 26th, early in the morning, everything explodes. A jeep with White Marines opens fire on the Black Marine depot, just drives by shooting. The camp guards return fire, injuring a White MP officer. The White Marines take cover and flee toward Agana. A group of armed Black Marines chase them. This is it. The riot everyone saw coming. Armed Marines chasing armed Marines through a Pacific Island town. But the White MPs have set up another roadblock outside Agana. The Black Marines are stopped and arrested, charged with unlawful assembly, rioting, theft of government property, and attempted murder. Stop and think about that for a second. 2 Black Marines murdered on Christmas Day by White Marines, the Black camp shot at by White Marines. And who gets arrested? The Black Marines who chased the shooters. That's the military justice system in 1944. Major General Larson convenes a court of inquiry to investigate the riot. 43 Marines are court-martialed, all of them convicted, all of them sentenced to several years in military prison. The military tries to keep it quiet. After all, you don't want the enemy reading in the newspaper about American troops rioting against each other. Bad for morale. Bad for America's image. Except there's a problem. A man named Walter Francis White. He's the executive director of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the most influential civil rights organization in America. And by pure chance, Walter White is on Guam in December 1944, right when everything blows up. White starts investigating. He talks to the Black Marines. He learns about the months of harassment, the discrimination, the violence. He discovers that white Marines had been throwing smoke grenades into areas where Black Marines were working with aviation fuel. He finds out about the systemic racism that created this situation, and he testifies about all of it during the investigation. Here's what makes this story different from Fort Lawton, from Eddie Slovic, from so many other military injustices. Walter White was there, in real time, fighting for these men while it was happening. Not 60 years later, when most of them were dead. Right then, when it mattered. Because of White's involvement, something unprecedented happens. Some white Marines are actually charged and convicted for their part in the disturbances. Not as many as should have been. Not the ones who committed murder on Christmas Day, but some. That almost never happened in 1944. But 43 Black Marines are still in military prison, convicted, branded as criminals, their service records destroyed, their futures ruined, for the crime of defending themselves against Marines who shot at them, who murdered their brothers, who terrorized them for months. The NAACP doesn't give up. Walter White and the organization launch a campaign. They bring pressure on the Department of the Navy. They go to the White House. They make noise. They refuse to let this be swept under the rug. And in 1946, something remarkable happens. The guilty verdicts are overturned. All 43 Black Marines are released from prison. Let that sink in. Justice. Actual justice. In 1946, when the military rarely admitted mistakes, when Black servicemen had almost no power, when the system was designed to grind them up and forget about them, the convictions were overturned. The men were freed. This is what makes the Agana Race Riot different from other stories. It's still a story of injustice, of racism, of a system that failed Black servicemen. But it's also a story of resistance, of fighting back, of refusing to accept injustice. And it's a story where, against all odds, justice actually won. Think about what these Black Marines faced. They'd volunteered or been drafted to fight for America. They'd watched Japanese soldiers fight to the death to hold Guam. They'd probably lost friends in the battle. And then, instead of being treated as heroes, they were treated like second-class citizens by their own fellow Marines. Harassed, threatened, murdered. And when they finally fought back, they were the ones arrested and convicted. The systemic racism was suffocating. Segregated barracks, separate mess lines, no chance for promotion, all the dangerous work, all the disrespect. And when they complained, nothing happened. When they defended themselves, they went to prison. That was America in 1944. But here's what the military didn't count on. These men had someone fighting for them. Walter White didn't back down. The NAACP didn't forget about them. And eventually the pressure worked. The convictions were overturned. It took 2 years. 2 years of these men sitting in military prisons for crimes they didn't commit, or crimes that were actually self-defense. But justice came. Compare this to Eddie Slovic. Eddie had nobody. His wife petitioned 7 presidents and got nothing. He died believing he was being executed for stealing bread as a kid. No pardon, no justice. Ever. Or Fort Lawton, where it took 63 years, and most of the men were dead before their convictions were overturned. The Agana Marines got justice in 2 years, while they were still young, while they could still rebuild their lives. That matters. That's the difference between a tragedy and a story of resilience. Both were injustices. Both were examples of a racist system destroying Black servicemen. But one had a fighter in the moment, and that made all the difference. The Agana Riot reveals something important about military justice in World War II. The system was deeply, fundamentally racist. Black servicemen were automatically assumed to be the aggressors, even when they were clearly the victims. White servicemen could murder black Marines on Christmas Day and face minimal consequences. But black Marines defending their camp after being shot at? Court-martial, prison, disgrace. Yet the system could be challenged. Not easily, not quickly, but it could be challenged. Walter White proved that. The NAACP proved that. Those 43 Marines proved that by surviving prison and coming home to rebuild their lives. The white Marines who murdered 2 black Marines on Christmas Day, we don't know what happened to them. The historical record is silent. They probably faced some form of court-martial, given Walter White's involvement. But we don't have their names. We don't have their stories. They've been forgotten by history. Meanwhile, the black Marines they terrorized are remembered. Their injustice is documented. Their eventual vindication is part of the historical record. There's a lesson in that. Injustice can be loud, violent, and immediate. But justice, even when it comes slowly, leaves a permanent mark. Those 43 Marines were convicted in 1944 and freed in 1946. 79 years later, we're still talking about them, still remembering what they faced, still honoring their resilience. The military learned something from Agana, though perhaps not enough. Combined with Port Chicago, Fort Lawton, and other racial incidents during the war, the pressure for integration became impossible to ignore. In 1948, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, beginning the desegregation of the armed forces. It was a long, slow process. Full integration didn't happen overnight. But the riots, the injustice, the stories of men like the Agana 43 helped force that change. Their suffering wasn't meaningless. Their resistance wasn't in vain. They fought for America in the Pacific. Then they fought for justice at home. And unlike so many others, they won. Christmas Eve, 1944. 9 black Marines given holiday passes, shot at by their own countrymen, 1 missing. By December 26th, 2 black Marines murdered, 43 convicted and imprisoned. By 1946, all 43 freed, convictions overturned, justice served. That's the Agana story. It's not a perfect story. Justice delayed is still injustice. 2 men died. 43 served time they shouldn't have served. The harassment and discrimination they faced was intolerable, but they got justice. They got vindication. They got to come home and live their lives. That's more than Eddie Slovic got. That's more than the Fort Lawton 43 got for 63 years. That's something. Remember the Agana 43. Remember that they were harassed, terrorized, shot at, convicted, and imprisoned for defending themselves. But also remember that they were freed. That justice eventually was served. That Walter White fought for them. That the NAACP didn't forget them. That the system, when pressured, could bend toward justice. The Agana Race Riot was one of the most serious racial incidents in the American military during World War II. It was a moment of shame, of failure, of injustice. But it was also a moment when resistance mattered. When fighting back mattered. When having someone who refused to let the system crush you mattered. Walter White mattered. The NAACP mattered. And those 43 Marines mattered enough that the convictions were overturned while they were still young enough to reclaim their lives. That's the story. Christmas Eve to December 26th, 1944. A riot on a Pacific island. 43 convictions. 2 years later, 43 men freed. Justice. Imperfect, delayed, but real. Remember them.